it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink and listen. Okay, so if this one sounds a little familiar, then it is. This is a remastered version of an old classic for reasons I will explain at the end of the video. Now, to get you into the mood, here's a little teaser. Deep beneath the earth, hidden behind rusted steel doors and layers of secrecy, there's a place the world was never meant to see. A classified underground facility. 13 prisoners. And a series of experiments so horrific that even the scientists conducting them begin to lose their minds. Tonight we descend into one of the most disturbing and psychologically brutal creepypastas ever written. The Human Experiment Chamber by Teololo. I am Harvey Syton, a humble researcher working for the International Secret Service. I was delighted to find out that I was leading the ISS's newest project, and testing is taking place primarily underground next week in the Human Experiment Chamber, SF-23. Its aim is to develop an innovative and shocking method of torture which is designed to discourage potential ISS members from betraying the organization, and as a punishment for captured hitmen from overseas discovered to be targeting ISS leaders. Over the course of the project, I will document every detail in this written report, along with a video to accompany the results of each experiment. After the project has formally ended, I'll suggest the best conclusion or conclusions to the testing based on the evidence collected. Once again, I thank my superiors for allowing me to pioneer this project, which will undoubtedly benefit the ISS community for as long as it exists. H.J. Syton, human biologist, qualified researcher, SG-64. Well, that's the opening statement for my report. Now, I don't blame you for thinking I'm some kind of insane genius, but I'm not the kind of Frankenstein you see on television. In fact, I'll admit, I'm a pretty emotionally unstable guy, and I've been hiding myself behind a facade since I joined the service. I'm working for the ISS, a criminal organization, and I've been working there for a long time now. The headquarters is situated underground on the coast of Concaven Island. It's like the Mafia, just less well known, and it's brought me a handful of problems as a US citizen, not to mention some emotional trauma too. But I couldn't resist the temptation of good pay for the rest of my life. So at the end of 2 years of service, I signed the unbreakable contract. After a further 2 years in the job, I began to believe that anyone, whether they started meek or macho, could condition themselves into a state of mind where they felt almost no empathy for anyone else. The human brain needs conditioning to keep its empathy senses refreshed, so the more you don't use it, the less you'll be inclined to feel sorry for random people, right? But then I realized it wasn't that simple, and sadly I realized too late. I'll take my word for it. If you're a normal, sane human being, don't ever try to fit in with the psychos. That's because there's a difference between the fakers and the real deal. What I'm trying to say is, you'll never know what's inside the mind of a psychopath if you weren't born one yourself. Anyone that tries to believe otherwise will, ultimately, drive themselves insane. Part 1. 9 a.m. It was time to meet the unfortunate victims. There were 13 inmates who'd arrived from a prison on the island. The purpose of seeing the subjects before beginning the tests was for estimating measurements, but it was still nice to get to know them before sending them to their deaths in the most painful ways imaginable. There were 2 women and 11 men. As I was scribbling down descriptions on my notepad, one of the big guys tried to attack me. Although he could only go as far as the metal bars of his cells would allow, the sudden outburst still made me jump. I made a mental note to order extra restraints for this one. I put my clipboard down, then decided to talk to them. Some swore at me in every sentence, but most of them were nicer than I'd imagined, which was creepy. Especially the middle-aged lady who'd poisoned her husband and had offered me a foot massage. I asked them what crimes they'd committed and whether they were scared at all. Some notable answers included things to do with animals and my mom. The sight of a teenager in one of the cells caught my interest. I'd never seen such a young inmate arrive here for testing before, and I wondered what crime he'd committed. I asked him if he was afraid of his approaching fate, and he answered, "I'm less scared than you are." I'm sad to say that he was probably telling the truth. A thin white smile spread across his face when he saw my expression change. I'm not sure why, but I suddenly felt slightly nauseous. I convinced myself he was bluffing and walked away quickly. A young blonde lady refused to talk to me at all. She sat in the corner of the last cell, sobbing continuously. I guessed that she was in her mid-20s. I asked why she was crying, and she tried her best to convince me that she'd been falsely accused of murdering her sister. Well, they don't lie when they tell me the most innocent-looking ones are always the most cunning. 1 p.m. I decided to skip lunch for reasons I'm sure you'll understand. My heart was beating fast, but I did my best to hide my anxiety, then called in the first test subject. I asked my scientist to set up the camera and other monitors whilst I prepared the instrument of death. Originally, I had no idea what to name it, but my little bored scientist suggested Angel's Wings, and he described it well. I chose the macho-looking guy who tried to attack me to go first. When he walked in, I expected at least a swagger or a glare, but I got none of that. I could see it in his eyes. The guy was more terrified than he'd ever been in his life. Security strapped him into the long box-shaped metal frame. He was encased in what looked like a hollow cage without the extra bars in the middle, and 2 flat iron bars met in the center of his body. Attached to their undersides were many small, sharp iron spikes, suspended above his chest. The guard nodded at me, and without warning I pressed a button which suddenly lowered the 2 iron bars, plunging the spikes into the middle of his chest and abdomen. He screamed and clenched his fists as blood began oozing out, then turned his head to look at me. I raised my eyebrows. "I'll only start when you're ready. Remember, the longer you wait, the more it'll hurt," I reminded him. He breathed heavily and turned his head back around to look at his bleeding body. Then he winced and looked away again. "What are you going to do to me?" he yelled. "The bars," I pointed, "are going to move in opposite directions until you split open." He took a moment to digest the thought. Can you hold my hand?" he pleaded, like a little child. I hadn't expected to hear that from a guy like this, and I was almost amused. "No," I answered straightforwardly. "Why, are you afraid I'll break your bones?" "Can I start now?" "Okay, just don't tell my family how I died. I don't want them to know what happened to me." "We're not going to tell your family anything." "Cheers," he wheezed quietly, then closed his eyes. "Fuck this stupid-ass world. Just do it." The scientists sat opposite me, holding their pens ready above their notepads, observing, eyes wide open like hungry wolves staring at prey. Simultaneously, I pressed the start button on the timer and flicked the switch which started his ordeal, preparing myself for the screams. The 2 metal bars began to pull his skin apart incredibly slowly. He grimaced with his eyes closed for 10 seconds and held it in for as long as he could, but when the green line on the pain monitor leapt up, his eyes burst open and he let out a blood-curdling shriek. Around the 3-minute mark, his organs started to be exposed, and I had to pause the machine temporarily, since he was close to passing out. I restarted it after 2 minutes. He was too tired to scream by the end of 10 minutes, when all of his organs were completely exposed, but it wasn't until they started to slide out of him when I started to cringe. I reminded myself that he was still alive and conscious whilst all this was happening, and suddenly I had an inexplicable urge to vomit. I knew I needed to keep focused and watch the graphs in case he died, but my mind drifted elsewhere. Though he was just a criminal, he had a family, and people that probably cared about him. What if they knew that I was the one doing this to him? I had a family too, and admittedly I hadn't told them the entire truth about my profession. What would they think? He was dying from something I created, and I never thought about it in that way before, and to be quite honest, it hurt me inside when I did. Well, I told myself that his family weren't here. They would never know of this, never know that I did it. Well, they probably didn't like him that much anyway. It doesn't fucking matter. Just do your job. I walked to the other side, where neither the scientist nor the camera could see, pretending to analyze the breathing graph in more detail. And there I gripped his hand, slippery from the blood dripping down it. He turned his head towards me, and for a second I thought I could see some sort of surprise in his eyes. I prayed that he wouldn't spend his last seconds alive cursing me. And then his skin ripped from his sides and dangled from the iron nails. He continued to breathe heavily for a few moments before he died, and the machine made a high-pitched beeping noise. Swallowing, I let go of his hand and waited as his organs sloshed out of him one by one and onto the floor. The timer said 15 minutes 35, and the lady scientist stopped the camera. 15 minutes 35 seconds. How was it? I asked. She looked down at her clipboard. The skin stayed intact, which was good, as it was on top of the priority list for this device. It moved outwards at a steady rate too. However, continued the bald scientist, the time he was alive fell short of the predicted time by half a minute. Also, if you were to redesign the model, we suggest some sort of appliance to keep the organs inside the body. That might improve the time. Their voices were calm and steady as they talked. I looked into their eyes, cold, robotic, unblinking. I wondered if they'd ever been sympathetic to anyone in their whole lives. I wonder if they were wearing masks like me. Right. Yeah, I was thinking that too. I'll take it into account in the report. Part 2. 2 days later, 4 p.m. My boss Orman grinned the whole time as he watched the video, occasionally making unsympathetic noises such as ouch and ooh. These people were not human. Either that or I was a lot less tough than I thought I was. It was time for the second torture instrument. This one was less unique than the first one, in the sense that similar things had been tried before, but it was the boss's idea, not mine. Apparently, it was also the one which kept the victim alive and suffering for the longest time. I called for security to bring me a random test subject. She was dragged into the room, screaming and begging. It was the young lady with the blonde hair. She shouted that she didn't do it, and that she was innocent, but I was taking none of it. I signaled at security to strap her into the confinements. I had a feeling she wasn't going to tell me when to kill her, so I didn't bother to warn her. Slowly, I took out a syringe and a small jar full of bluish-yellow liquid. I closed the box, then unscrewed the jar lid, sucking out a syringe full of its contents. No, please, don't do this to me. I walked closer, holding my poker face, showing her I was uninterested. She continued to sob and pant. I wasn't the one, she whispered as she shook her head frantically. I know who killed her. It wasn't me. Don't do it. I positioned the syringe above her collarbone and plunged it into her neck. She moved too much, so I had to steady the needle to avoid it snapping. As the fluid entered her skin, her neck started to turn slightly blue, and her veins swelled up. She gasped in agony. Then I ran over to the laptop and started the timer. According to the measurements, she'd be dead in around 3 days. Strap her head to the wall, I told the lady scientist. When her neck turns white, you can leave. I'm off to take a bite. Harvey Syton, she shrieked at an ear-piercing pitch, just as I was about to walk out of the door. I turned around, my eyes wide open. Oh, I hated it when they called my name. You're a smart young person. You've got a lot left to live for. Why did you become a murderer? Murderer? I wasn't a murderer. It was my job to kill murderers. And that doesn't count as murder, does it? Who are you to judge? Something clicked inside me, and I suddenly felt feverish, like my brain was overheated. Well, I would ask you exactly the same, forgetting momentarily that she wasn't a guy. I really didn't. You have to believe me. I finally went to get my lunch. Man, it had been a rough day. I changed my clothes and came out from underground after 2 hours of security checks, and a thought crossed my mind. How was I so sure that she was guilty of the murder? Was it faith in the justice system? Well, most likely, of course, but it didn't matter whether she was or not. She was already going to die. But it felt like I needed some sort of proof, or I'd be uncomfortable living with the possibility that I killed an innocent for the rest of my life. 7 p.m. Just one more hour of goddamn report writing, then I could go home. My eyes were starting to see double. But then there were the security checks again. I had to keep my profile real low working for the ISS, and that meant suffering another 2 hours of fatigue. An alarm sounded, and I got out of my cubicle to take a look at what was happening. The secret agents scurried around like black mice, mainly towards the left corridor, so I followed them. It just so happened that Allman was looking for me. He led me to the cells in which the test subjects were kept, and I saw all of them strapped tightly to the wall, much like the lady in the experiment chamber. 2 of the cells, which I realized belonged to the middle-aged woman and a bald guy, were empty. I asked my boss what was happening, and he explained that one of the guys monitoring the CCTV footage wasn't paying attention, which had allowed the 2 removed subjects to commit suicide by banging their heads on the wall repeatedly. Part 3. 1 day later, 4 p.m. I checked on the lady still strapped in the chamber before I began testing on the next victim. Unsurprisingly, she'd stopped resisting and her body hung almost lifeless. Her whole body had turned white except for her face, which had a blue tinge. Sweat still dripped from her forehead, so I gave her some water, then examined the graphs, comparing them to the ones produced by the first test subject. Pain receptors detected slightly lower levels of trauma than the first, but it had a tendency to increase as the victim approached death. Security produced a crooked old guy with the most circular spine I'd ever seen, and they looked at me as if asking whether this guy was suitable or not. Yeah, he'll do. Strap him in. I fastened my goggles, then put on my gloves and protective clothing. He made no noise, just looked around. I was hoping that I'd started to get accustomed to the project since this was my 3rd test already, but as I imagined him crying out in pain, I felt that inevitable sense of dread return. It was annoying me now. He sat down on a metal chair with a circular base. Unlike the others, his eyes told me nothing. He just seemed like a man tired of being alive. The chair was nailed tightly to the wall behind it, and was clamped to the ground for extra security. His limbs were locked in place. His arms were spread in a T-shape across the wall, and his legs were fastened to the legs of the chair. Then his head was strapped into a solid square-shaped device with an iron frame, and the scientists used 2 tiny metal clamps to clamp his eyelids wide open. Using more metal clamps, the device positioned a curved block of solid green acid just a millimeter or 2 in front of his open eyes. A large glass box was placed over his head. When you're ready. There was no hesitation at all. I pulled a lever, and the device moved the block of acid so that it was pressed against his eyes. He screamed, and I quickly flicked a switch above my head which first sealed the glass box so that it became airtight, then activated a heater which produced a temperature of around 50 degrees Celsius. As the acid melted, it burned his eyes and skin. The green line shot up instantly, and the device rattled as he tried to move. An hour later, there was nothing left except for patches of black, red, and green. His face was pink, and the skin of his cheeks and forehead was burnt raw and purple. He groaned constantly. I couldn't resist closing my eyes for a while because I didn't want to look anymore. There were cameras and observers everywhere doing that for me, so I didn't have to anyway. Surely I could give myself a little comfort by saying that he deserved what he got. I took a deep breath and opened my eyes again and turned to the scientists. It ends here when the acid melts completely. 1 hour, 3 minutes. I pressed the last button, and a blade sliced his head off completely. Part 4. I sat at my desk, typing away. Clunk. Abruptly, I spun around on my chair. There was nothing behind me, so I shut the door and continued writing the reports. I planned to upload the video along with it too, as I usually did. However, I seemed to have misplaced my laptop, and that was a problem because I transferred the video files onto there from the camera. The lights flickered, and I heard more bumping and knocking noises, but I wasn't sure where they were coming from. Just as I was about to get up and investigate, the phone rang and I sat back down to pick it up. Harvey Syton, from room SG64. Who's speaking? This is Allman. Well, hi, boss. How can I help? I'd like you to show what you've done so far regarding your report to our newest contract killer. Treat this also as part of the ISS contract testing. I zoned out and stopped listening to his words. Someone or something was slowly shifting into view of the cubicle window. Someone with her face whiter than paper. Someone blonde, clutching her neck. She limped closer and closer to the small glass viewing pane in front of me. I panicked as a million questions raced through my mind. How did she get out? How could she have moved all the way across the corridor without being seen? What the hell should I do now? She turned her head and blood dripped from her mouth and nose down onto her white prison uniform. When the side of her lips curved upwards into a smile, I nearly shit my pants. There was only a thin sheet of glass separating her from me. Syton, are you still there, Syton? A voice came from the telephone, which I dropped at my feet. I've come to warn you, she spluttered. They told me to. They said they'll get you, and everyone you love. What? What are you talking about? I yelled. You have a young brother called Joey. He lives with your parents on the coast. Do you know where they are? How the hell did you know that? She was bringing up family members I hadn't seen in ages, since I'd started working for the ISS. They took your laptop. They know everything about you. You can't hide from them anymore. Who is they? You'll see. A bead of sweat trickled down the side of my face. The problem was, it wasn't my laptop. It was the ISS's, on which they stored the database of their employees. Furthermore, if they knew things like my brother's name, they must have also been able to access it with the password. My mind was in a chaotic state, but I only worried truly about one thing. Whoever they were, they had access to information about me which they weren't supposed to know. My address, and the address of my family members. I flicked the emergency switch and bolted the fuck out of there. 2 seconds later, security guards grabbed the lady and dragged her back to her cell, following the trail of blood. I wondered what on earth had gone wrong. Then, after I entered the imprisonment chamber with the security guards, I immediately knew who they were. 2 of the doors of the cells were left wide open, and I couldn't believe it. Who's in charge of the security cameras here? I yelled. The inmates stared at us, heads strapped to the wall, smiling unnervingly. The lady scientist ran into the chamber. I believe it was the man wearing the trench coat. He told me he wanted to have a word with you. Well, I'm not going to bloody talk to him. Just tell him he's fired from my department for neglect and misconduct. Right now. And she ran off without a word, and so did I, back through the hallway and into my office cubicle. Before my boss could catch me, I'd secured all the locks on the door and took out my personal cell phone, dialing my brother's number. He'd ask about this mess, and I'd have to cover it up somehow, but first I had to warn him that his life was in danger. He didn't pick up the first time, so I tried again. I was relieved for a second when he did, until I heard the voice on the other end speak. "Hi, bro. How you doing?" It was cold and brittle, nothing like Joey's voice. "Who are you?" "You know who I am, Harvey. You wouldn't forget your own brother, would you?" "Oh, cut it out. Tell me what you've done to him." "If you really want to know, you'll have to be patient." "How did you get past security?" "I said, you'll have to wait." The line cut off, and I steadied my breathing as best I could, but I still wasn't able to stop myself shaking. Or should I call the police? No, there's nothing they'd be able to do. My phone vibrated, and an email popped up. There was no subject, and the only word in the email was, "Enjoy." Great, they'd found out my email address too. And what the hell were these attachments? The thumbnails were blurred, so I couldn't tell what it was exactly. I uploaded the videos onto the computer and clicked on the first one, which was named Man 1. After a brief period of static noise, the picture came into view. The video quality was bad, but I could make out that it was some sort of warehouse. 3 figures sat in clear view next to each other, each tied to a chair by their arms and legs. From left to right, I recognized them as my dad, my mom, and my brother Joey. They were unconscious, and their heads drooped to the side. Panic came over me, and I choked on my saliva, spluttering as I continued to watch. My family were in danger, and it was all because of me. Someone began to talk, but I couldn't hear his voice over the sound of the alarm and the chaotic yelling in the background. I turned up the volume and rewound. "Hello, Syton." It was the same creepy voice I'd heard on the other end of the line just now. A man walked into view, though I could only see him from the waist downwards. He was wearing black jeans and sneakers. Another one followed him, wearing the prison uniform trousers, and was barefoot. The guy in the sneakers was on the left. He poured water on my parents and Joey, and they began to regain consciousness slowly. They were all in a state of shock. "Where the fuck is this?" I heard Joey yell. "Who the—" Another voice silenced him. It belonged to the teenager. "This is for the big guy." He pointed at my dad, who looked around, terrified. "Wait. Take the phone. Go to the other side," he instructed the other guy. The camera moved up and closer to my dad as the teenager flipped the chair so that my dad was lying on the floor on the chair back. When they both took out knives, I realized what was going to happen. No, you've got to be kidding me," I whispered. There was screaming and shouting in the background. They stabbed my dad just below his neck and pulled down sharply, splitting his abdomen. Then they used the knives to cut him open, exposing his organs. I couldn't watch, so I looked away. When I looked back, my dad had stopped yelling in pain, and his head had dropped. "No, fuck," I screamed, as I felt tears roll down my face. My nails had punctured the skin of my palms, and there was blood on my sleeves. The video was cut off, and the window closed. I still couldn't stop shaking and breathing hard. I clicked on the second video, named Woman 2, and braced myself for the worst. But I wasn't ready for what I would see next. The footage was shaky because the teenager was holding the camera. The other guy was in the scene, and he'd put a hand over my mum's mouth to stop her screaming. Joey yelled at him to let go of my mum, but his anguished cries were left unheard. "This is for the blonde chick," he said. He held a glass bottle full of some strange red liquid, which fizzed about. I screamed when I realized what he was about to do next. He unwrapped a syringe he'd taken from the cardboard box on the floor, then extracted some of the liquid in it. He proceeded to inject it into her neck, then he chucked it over his shoulder. The chair rocked back and forth as my mum yelled in pain, and her legs kicked the chair. Minutes later, blood squirted out of her eyes, and her skin had turned blue as she suffocated to death. I closed it down, sobbing uncontrollably. I felt drops of blood slither down my arm as I clicked on the final video, titled Man 3. They'd switched roles again. Now the teenager was in the scene and the camera focused on Joey. "Dude, bring it closer," he told the other guy. When he did, I was able to see the stains the tears had made on Joey's face. "This is for the hunchback." His voice was almost happy. He took the bottle of red liquid from the previous clip and unscrewed the cap, laughing. Joey cried and yelled at him to stop. Both guys started laughing wildly as he put on some plastic gloves and pinched Joey's face. He poured the liquid directly onto his face, burning it pink and black. Joey's screams were muffled out by the sound of gargling and choking. And then I vomited. I skipped the last 10 seconds or so, as I couldn't bear to watch it all. Both guys were in view now, the teenager holding the camera like he was taking a selfie. "Do you know what this is?" the other guy asked me directly, as he pulled out the laptop from inside the cardboard box. "We saw the videos you made, so we decided to make our own as well. We thought it was rather fucking mean, so we decided to give you a taste of your own medicine. You can't get us, but we'll see you soon, Harvey Syton. We're coming for you." Then the two murderers laughed madly. The video turned black and the browser closed for the last time. They'd split my dad open like I'd split open the first man. They'd injected my mom with poison like I'd injected poison into the blonde lady. And they burned the face of my brother like I'd burned the face of the old man. They'd made me pay. And that was it. I prayed the videos were fake or something, but who was I kidding? I'd sent my own family to their deaths, and they'd never even been told what was happening. Essentially, I'd killed them. Now karma had sealed my fate, and I was next. I understood real pain. For the first time in my life, I asked myself, why did I not have the dignity to treat each human being as alive? Why the fuck did I allow myself to take up a job which would cause not just pain and suffering for the victims, but endless grief for their families as well? Ultimately, I dragged myself into a position so low even criminals would mock my name. Anyone working for the ISS was a cursed madman. I wasn't a psychopath. I didn't want to be a psychopath, and I was going to stop pretending to be one too. Someone was knocking on the door, but I ignored it. I wondered why, when I held the bloody hand of the dying man, did I not clench my fists till my nails made my hands bleed? Why, when I injected the poison into the veins of the lady, did I not cry and yell for her pain to stop? Why, when I scorched the face of the old crook, did I not vomit in disgust? I knew what I had to do. I unlocked the door and raced past the man waiting for me outside. The boss's office was in the building below, and I was sure he was at the scene of the discovered breakouts. I took the lift down and went into the room, searching for his gun. Grabbing it from the top shelf, I took the lift back up and bolted through the empty hallway. Employees and contract killers alike had gathered around the imprisonment chamber, and an irate, red-faced Orman was cursing, trying to figure out what had happened. The inmates knew everything, and they laughed and spat at him. I pushed past them with all my strength until I found myself standing back in the experiment chamber, where only the blonde lady was still restrained. I locked the door behind me, blocking out most of the noise. She was still strapped tightly against the wall, and her face was deathly pale. Her body convulsed violently. Using what little strength she had left, she turned to look at me. I walked closer to her and aimed the gun at her head. "I believe you," I said. "Whether you're telling the truth or not, I still believe you. Because you were right, I am a murderer." Her face lit up, and I pulled the trigger, putting her out of her misery. I sat down and cried for a long time. I cried because I realized the barbaric shame I'd brought upon humanity, and how I'd failed to see it until it was too late. If I were the Harvey Syton everyone thought I was, I wouldn't be here sobbing like a baby. I'd be denying that I ever did anything wrong, carrying on with my life feeling no shame or remorse. But I'm not a psychopath, and I think that somewhere in the back of my mind I always knew I would never live up to my name, and I lived in fear of the day that I'd acknowledge it. Well, my story ends here. I hope you enjoyed it, because you're not going to hear from me again. I'm not proud of a single thing I've done in my life except for what I'm about to do now, because if I've learnt one thing from all this, it's that I should never have been born. Someone's telling me to open the door. I have the gun pointed at my head, but I'm hesitant because I'm afraid. Wait a minute. Harvey Jack Syton afraid? What irony. No doubt the people I butchered were afraid, but it's not like they had any choice. I'm the one giving myself the easy way out. It's time to fix that mistake named the existence of Harvey Syton. It's time to end it here. Part 5. The lady scientist sauntered into the research hall. She had a proud grin on her face as she looked around. A while later, everyone stopped talking and stared at her, wondering what the hell she was doing. At last, she spoke. "Guess who Almond's new head researcher is?" Everyone clapped with congratulation. She walked over to her new assistant, the little bald scientist, who patted her on the back. "You won't go bats and shoot yourself like Syton did, right?" "Of course not. I'm a professional." She took care to emphasize that word. Well, I remember he said something like that as well. "Never mind. When are you going to restart the testing?" Her grin widened, spreading from ear to ear. "Yes, I've got everything planned. We're starting tomorrow. I modified Syton's remaining prototypes with my own little touch, so they're going to produce the best results possible." "What? Right now? We haven't even prepared the experiment chamber." "Then what the hell are you standing around for?" she snapped. "And while you're at it, tell Allman we need 2 more subjects to replace the ones that got away." "Whatever you say." Now, where was his laptop, containing the videos? She couldn't find it anywhere in his room, but it probably would reappear later. She walked into the empty chamber and stood still momentarily to calm herself. She'd never been more pleased in her life. This was where she would continue his work, and she couldn't wait another second to start. She sat at the desk and began to think about his suicide, which had occurred to her as, strange. Syton's prototypes and report were both excellent, admittedly better than anything she could ever produce. He was the perfect man for the job, and it was the perfect job for him. Why a man in such a great position would want to kill himself was beyond her understanding. And she would never understand, because she was pure evil. She'd been born that way. The Human Experiment Chamber, Episode 2. Yvonne Gates was head researcher. Allman had been forced to promote her after security discovered the dead body of Harvey Syton lying in the experiment chamber 5 weeks ago. The reason behind his suicide was still a mystery, and though she thought about it for a long time, she was never able to reach a sensible conclusion as to why he'd finally pulled the trigger. However, that issue didn't matter anymore, because she had now become the 3rd most respected figure on Conchaven Island, standing only before headquarters boss Allman and the boss of the ISS. She'd finally realized her secret childhood dream, to become one of the most feared criminals in the world. The project was nearly over, which disappointed her slightly. Over the weeks, she'd enjoyed using Syton's prototypes to butcher, burn, and skin most of the remaining test subjects. She was proud of the tests because they produced decent results which delighted the boss. Their screams did not haunt her, but pleased her very much, and each experiment prompted her to take the next to more extreme heights. Now there were only 3 left alive, lying in wait for death to come, terrified. Furthermore, her pay had been tripled. She couldn't have been happier in her life. Sitting in Syton's cubicle, which was now her own, she unwrapped a packet of crisps and put her feet up on the desk. As soon as she reclined back in her chair, the phone rang and she rolled her eyes, taking her feet off the desk again to reach it. Yvonne Gates, SG-64. May I know who's speaking? Yeah, I'll tell you who's speaking. It's your boss, Allman. Oh, hello, Allman. What can I do for you? She always called him by his last name, never boss. That was what Syton used to call him, and she refused to follow in his footsteps. She refused to suck up to him. The only person she would call boss was the real boss himself. I want to discuss private matters. Please come to my office. Sure, I'll come over when I finish my lunch. No, Gates. You'll be over here right now. Allman's secret. Gates, I'm warning you, he growled. You may think you're something. The boss might reckon that too, but I know what you want. And you know it too, so don't deny it. Allman, I have absolutely no idea what you're going on about. For some reason, the one time Yvonne Gates ever told the truth in her life, Allman still hadn't believed her. I knew you wouldn't admit it. You're a goddamn fox, that's what you are. Never mind, it's only natural. I'd want exactly what you want if I were in your position. But remember, you're just a temporary replacement. You're not half the man Syton was, and you never will be. That's a little sexist. You know what I fucking mean. Now go away and just remember that I'll be watching every move you make. Sorry, Allman, but the language you're using is threatening. I could get you reported if... Gates, just get out of my sight. I refuse to leave until an explanation has been... Get out, Allman yelled in fury, slapping the keyboard on his desk. He picked up the cordless phone and aimed it at her head. Without hesitation, she sprinted out of his cubicle and wondered what the hell was wrong with him. Gates and Allman hadn't been getting on particularly well since he'd been forced to promote her. He didn't like her self-worshipping personality and much preferred Syton, who'd been naturally quiet and never questioned his superiors. She couldn't deny that she enjoyed Syton's company as well, but now she'd replaced him, and she was going to make it clear that she was there to stay. And strangest of all, she couldn't understand why Allman had burst out like that. There had been tension between them, but it had never gotten violent until then. What was he so worried about? Something he thought she apparently knew? A secret? Well, for once, she didn't know anything she wasn't supposed to know, and that worried her. Suddenly, Max Bridges appeared right in front of her from nowhere, making her lose her train of thought. Bridges was the good-looking contract killer who'd recently been employed by Allman and moved from an underground ISS branch in Indonesia to the HQ. He was a smooth guy with the most gorgeous neck-length dark hair and a smile that would make any girl swoon. But she could argue that she was pretty attractive herself, being a woman in her mid-20s. That's why he'd seemed to have taken a strong liking to her after he joined the HQ. She didn't deny that he was pretty cool, but as of now, she wasn't interested. He was merely a tool she could use in her rise up the ranks, just like everyone else. She stumbled backwards and nearly fell, but he caught her arm just in time. "How have you been, babe?" He winked twice as he spoke. "Not bad, you?" Bridges lifted her chin and leaned in for a kiss, but the grin on his face disappeared when he felt sharp fingers grip his neck. The idea. They walked together through the central hallway, side by side. "That hurts, you little fuck," moaned Bridges as he rubbed the bottom of his chin. "That'll teach you to touch a girl." Thinking about Orman again, she found herself glaring angrily at the back of his head as she passed his cubicle window. "Bridges, do you like Orman?" she suddenly asked, her voice no louder than a whisper. He raised his eyebrows disappointedly at her, as if he were listening to a little girl beginning to gossip. "Yes, I love almonds." "Seriously? Orman?" He chuckled. "To be honest with you, I haven't known him as long as you, so I can't really judge any better than you can. He doesn't look that great, though. Why? What's he done to you now?" "Remember, this is strictly between us two. Do you understand?" "Sure thing, babe." "So, just a minute ago," she began, "he called me into his place to yell at me. But the thing is, this time he kept on saying that he thought I knew something, or that I was going to do something. And then he demanded I admit it. I don't know what the hell he's bullshitting on about." She took a breath, then continued. "Then I got the fuck out of there, because he was going to chuck something at me. Do you think he's going nuts?" "I don't know. Well, he definitely doesn't treat me like that. I haven't signed the contract yet, even after 5 years of working at the ISS, so if he did dare to yell at me, I'd get myself out of here and the boss would kill him for losing someone productive and valuable like me." That was stupid, Bridges. I signed the damn thing a year into the job. Now I'm stuck here for the rest of my life. "Well, I'm sure it's not just that. You mentioned he likes Syton, right?" "Yeah, and he's using that against me as well. He keeps on feeling the need to remind me that I'm not as good as Syton. Well, at dick-sucking. Bullshit." "Well, I definitely hope you are," he smiled. She looked at him angrily and sighed. They were both clueless, but then he thought about it for a while and he finally understood. "You said he accused you of knowing something, of wanting to do something, am I right?" "Yeah, I couldn't imagine what, though." Bridges suddenly laughed out loud, hysterically. "How on earth could you be so stupid?" he remarked. "What?" "Look, think about who you were and who you are now. He hates you because he knows you like taking stuff for yourself. Oh, don't look at me like that. Everyone knows you're like that, even me. His favorite employee, Syton, just died and now he's been forced to make you the head researcher. So were you just going to stop it there? Weren't you thinking of, I don't know, maybe getting promoted just a little further?" At first she didn't understand, but then she realized what he was getting at. You see, both Orman and Bridges were both thinking one step ahead of her. They seemed to know her far better than she knew herself. "Oh, you're right," she gasped. "He thinks I'm going to try and steal his job." "Wow, and Orman thought he knew what you were thinking. Talk about smart," he jeered. "But you're the type who usually plans these evil things. Why didn't you think of such an obvious thing to do?" "I don't know. My mind was wandering at the time, and I was too busy enjoying myself with that project. I wasn't really thinking about stuff like that." "You mean, that project? Well, too much blood and guts for my taste. I'd rather just shoot them. But I guess you like that kind of thing, you creepy psycho." "I suggest you watch your mouth, because you're talking to the head researcher here." "Yeah, whatever. See you later, babe. Feel free to cut me open any time." He blew a kiss as he walked down another corridor, and she rolled her eyes again. Bridges was smarter than he looked, and she reckoned staying on his good side would do her well. Still, she couldn't understand why such a blatantly obvious idea hadn't even popped into her mind. Now she knew what Orman was thinking. She could put her worries to the side. Hallucinations. She made herself tea before returning to the imprisonment chamber. The security camera had run out of battery, so the 3 remaining inmates had been left unsupervised for at least 3 or 4 days. Jackson, the bald scientist who was monitoring the security pictures, had forgotten to feed them, and they sat stationary in the corners of their cells. When she entered, carrying a handful of batteries, they glared at her menacingly. "How you doing, boys?" They didn't reply, but started growling in anticipation. She dragged the stool across the room and positioned it under the broken camera. The soon-to-be test subjects watched every move she made, lying completely still in waiting. She stepped up onto the stool and removed the camera from the wall. "Yvonne Gates." She heard an ominous whisper from behind her. "Who's that?" "Yvonne Gates." It came again. "You want to do it. You do." She heard another voice. "You want to do it. You know you want to. You want it, you do. And you're gonna get it, aren't you?" "Stop it. Stop," she demanded, becoming a little afraid. She turned around and all 3 inmates were clutching the bars of their cells, staring at her with wide eyes. The 3 voices spoke in unison. They all told her to do it. Were they trying to scare her? "Kill him, Yvonne Gates. Do it. You can do it. You want to do it, don't you, Yvonne Gates? We want you to. Just do it. Just kill him." "What? Kill who?" Even though she asked, somehow in the back of her mind she knew who they were talking about. "You don't like him, do you? Then just kill him. Slice him open and it's all yours. You know you want to do it." It was crazy. Where were they getting the ideas from? She glanced down at her hands. Even they were telling her to do it. Could she really? "Do it, Yvonne Gates. Just kill him. You know you want to." She lifted her head again. To her surprise, she saw all the inmates back where they were, huddled in the corners of their cells. They were no longer staring at her, no longer gripping their cell bars. They didn't speak and made only quiet, animalistic noises. Confused, she shook her head. Had she really imagined that whole episode? If she had, well, it meant something. Even her subconscious mind was telling her to get rid of him. No, it was telling her more than just that. It was trying to say that once Allman was gone, everything would be hers, and she would be the one to drive him out. Only she could kill him and claim all. Well, she'd think about it later, as it seemed like a risky but viable option. Stepping off the stool, she clicked open the battery compartment of the camera and bent down to select a few replacements. To her horror, there were no old batteries in the compartment. There was nothing. It was empty. That meant someone must have deliberately taken them out, but no employee would have done that. She looked up again, and this time the inmates were growling suspiciously loudly. She walked a few steps further into the center of the chamber, where they stared at her intently. It was then that she noticed each of the inmates' cell locks were positioned at a slightly strange angle. She couldn't help seeing it because it seemed odd. It was as if the lock pads had been turned upside down. And then she realized that they had been broken. The inmate's growling rose in volume. Suddenly one of them jumped out of his cell, prompting the others to escape too. They launched themselves into the center of the room, snarling and breathing heavily, crawling on all fours like wild beasts. Each opened his mouth wide open, and spit dribbled from their chins. Then they started advancing slowly towards her. "Security! Security!" she shrieked, watching their hungry eyes glowing in anticipation. They attacked her and she screamed. The camera fell out of her hands and onto the floor, shattering into many pieces. The inmates mauled her and ripped at her flesh with their teeth, chewing off chunks of her face and arms. She flailed around madly in pain, and they continued to crawl around her and bite into her limbs. "Help me!" Her screams were muffled. 5 guards dashed into the chamber, followed by Allman and the bald scientist. Blood covered everything in sight, and even the brightest parts of Gates' white coat had been stained a painful shade of pink. Security dragged the inmates off of her, throwing them back into their cells. They tried to jump back out, but they were tranquilized, and soon all 3 of them fell into a deep sleep. She felt herself being lifted into a stretcher and carried away. The last thing she saw before she passed out was her left hand, which was now no more than a gloopy red mass of flesh, skin, and bone. Orman shook his head, gazing disappointedly at the blood splatters in the middle of the room. What a shame. The HQ really does need to order some new locks, doesn't it, Jackson? The bald scientist eyed him suspiciously. Well, you seem calm, boss. Well, one does need to be calm in situations like this. It's the only way you can get through life, you know. They don't call me headquarters boss for nothing. He walked over to the pile of batteries and the shattered pieces of camera. He picked up 2 of the plastic pieces, which he fit together like a puzzle. Shame, he said again, turning it over and looking at the battery compartment. These things cost a fortune. He smiled, gazing down into the empty slots from which he had removed the batteries. Awoken. She opened her eyes again. She sat up to examine her surroundings and saw that spots of blood had stained her pillow. Her wounds didn't seem to hurt much, so she lifted the covers off herself. She was wearing a light blue patient gown, and her limbs and face were wrapped in bandages. She unwrapped her facial bandages slightly and dragged her fingers across her face. She was delighted that she felt only 2 stitches, one down her left cheek and one in front of her ear. Well, at least the attack hadn't damaged her face too much. But her left hand was still a mess, and underneath the bandages she could see that the top part of her thumb was missing. She felt a sharp pain in her shoulder, forcing her to lie back down. A nurse entered the room, bringing her a cup of coffee and some biscuits. Ah, Gates, you're awake. Do you remember what happened to you before you came here? The door opened again, and Max Bridges stepped in. She groaned silently to herself. He had a sly grin on his face, and his hands were behind his back. As he walked closer to the bed, he took them out, revealing a bunch of flowers wrapped in pink plastic paper. How are you, babe? Oh, that's sweet, she smiled, as he placed the flowers on the table beside her bed. He placed an unopened card on top of them, which read, Get well soon, on the front in large pink letters, above a picture of a teddy. Now, can I have a kiss? Bridges. She sat up and pecked him on the lips. Gates and Bridges, sighed the nurse. My perfect town has gates and bridges. Psh, corny puns, mouthed Gates. I'll leave you 2 to it. The nurse then went out of the room. Now, would you mind telling me what the hell happened to you? I can kind of remember it, but not too clearly, she began. I was going to change the batteries on the security camera in the place where I kept the test subjects. She paused. She wasn't sure whether she should tell him what had happened next in her mind as of yet. No, she would skip that part. He nodded. I thought it was weird because broken cameras usually give the computer an alert telling you to replace the batteries. And nobody had known about this for ages until I asked about it. But then I found out the batteries weren't broken. There were no batteries. Someone had taken the batteries out and the CCTV images didn't get through to Jackson. I don't blame him because that's why he forgot to feed the test subjects. Yeah, I was thinking the cables were quite stable here. Even if one broke, it would send an alert message. But not if someone deliberately took them out. He paused and thought for a few seconds. I swear I saw Allman go in there once. He was by himself as well, and... What? A security guard always has to accompany a boss into the chamber. I mean, that's the rules. Yeah, exactly. That's why I thought it was strange, but well, it was nothing really. Well, it's something now, she laughed. It's something serious. I always knew it. Allman was the one who took the batteries out. Hey, don't jump to conclusions. Don't question it. I know it was him. He planned it all, and he knew this shit would happen. She lowered her voice then. He knew Jackson would forget to feed them. Jackson was monitoring the security pictures. Well, he's old and a bit ditzy. If he didn't see the picture, he wouldn't question it. Allman knew that I'd be the one next to go in there. That's why he loosened the locks on the cells, and they were able to jump out and attack me. Well, that's a sensible conclusion, I guess. Well, what then? Do you think all three of the inmates could have broken the locks themselves, taken the batteries out of the camera, and then had the sanity to hide back in their cells just to jump out at the last minute to bite me? Who else would have done it? Who else hates me as much as Allman does? Yeah, okay, makes sense. But what do you want to do about that now? I honestly don't know. They looked at each other, their faces more tense than before. The door opened and Allman came into the room. She was surprised to see Bridges stand up and leave the room abruptly. Miss Gates, how's it been? He almost jeered at her. Well, anger boiled up inside her, and she felt like she wanted to knock his teeth out right there and then. But she resisted, keeping her face totally calm and professional. I appreciate your concern, Allman. I've been well, thanks. The recovery's been slow, but I've been well. He took out a small box of chocolates from his briefcase and put them onto the table, but no get-well card followed. Thank you. She smiled. I'm very grateful for all this, but it's really not needed. Oh, I see someone's already beat me to it, he said, looking at the flowers Bridges had given her. Who's it from? Before she could stop him, he opened the cards. Great, now Allman knew about their relationship. He was bound to degrade Bridges too. She just hoped he wouldn't hate her for it. Who's BS? Bridges hadn't signed it with his full name, not even his initials. She sighed in relief, reminding herself that he was smarter than he looked. That's my friend Beatrice Smith, she said, quickly making up a random name. She's working for the IS department in the Philippines. It was quite nice to receive her mail. Really? Never heard of her. And did she mail the flowers to you too? They look a bit too alive for that. She clenched her fists. No, those were from the emergency department. Bullshit. What? A bead of sweat rolled down her forehead. His eyes seemed too narrow for safety. He laughed. I mean, the BS must stand for bullshit. Flowers are pretty bullshit too. I mean, look at them. They're cheap. All these people have absolutely no idea how to buy gifts. I'll have to discipline my emergency department better next time. Of course, God forbid there ever is a next time. He wore a jolly smile on his face. She swallowed and her pulse relaxed. Thanks for the chocolates, Allman. Really isn't necessary, but thank you so much. I'll enjoy them. He picked up his briefcase and walked towards the door, then turned back around. Oh, you will, won't you? They're professional quality. And then he disappeared. Irate, she gritted her teeth and sliced the cardboard box open with her sharp red fingernails. Her conclusion seemed to make sense. This was a man who'd planned to kill her, in fear of his position being stolen. Now there was an obvious sense of conflict between them. She knew the fight to become headquarters boss had begun. She wasn't going to lose to him. She picked up a finger-shaped chocolate and cracked it open. There was a strange yellow paste inside it, which smelled odd. She licked it and spluttered because it tasted slightly bitter. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized he'd tried to do it once more, and noted the fact that he hadn't attached a card, so she couldn't frame him for murder. She swept her arm across the front of the table, shoving the whole box and its contents into the bin. The sign. Gates sat in the experiment chamber, all alone. In front of her was the first lethal creation of Harvey Syton, the deadly angel's wings. She stood up, then walked over to it. Her high heels created loud, echoing footsteps which filled the entire chamber as she walked. She ran a finger down the undersides of the two flat iron bars which met in the middle, where the subject's chest would be. The sharp iron spikes pierced her skin, and she licked the blood away. "Hello, Gates." A familiar but unknown voice called her name. She turned around, but nobody was there. Oh no, not the voices again. Who the fuck is this? Do you remember me? She recoiled in shock. Harvey Jack Syton stood behind her, on the other side of the angel's wings. "Syton," she shouted. "How are you? I thought you were dead." "Yes, I'm afraid I was too, but I came back to warn you." "Warn me? About what?" "By replacing me, you're walking into a deadly trap." Before she could move, she found herself entrapped between hollow metal bars, the angel's wings. How had she ended up in there? She didn't even remember herself getting up. Struggling to free herself, she resisted the iron bars. Suddenly, Syton lowered the spikes and she screamed as they dug into her body. Blood oozed out onto her white coat and dripped down her legs. Just then she saw Syton's hand on the lever. "No, don't do it. Have mercy," she shrieked with all her might. "Syton, I used to work for you. Look, you're the original, I'm the replacement. You're the real one, I'm the fake one. Just don't do it, please. Don't do it." He ignored her desperate pleas and pulled it down. The machine began to work, ripping her torso open from the middle. The pain was unbearable, and she screamed even more loudly. "Gates, this is what will happen if you continue to sit idly and watch. You will die," said Syton, holding a calm look on his face as he usually had when he was alive. "It's either you or him. You've seen him try to do it twice already. You've got to do it. Save yourself while you can. You can get everything. Just kill him. You know you want to do it. You know it." It was telling her to do it again. The voices had returned. She pushed against her restraints, trying to cover her ears. She recognized that familiar line. It wasn't the real Syton talking to her. She was just imagining the whole thing. Relieved, she realized she wasn't really going to die, and the pain stopped abruptly. She woke up, dazed in a cold sweat. The vivid image of the angel's wings was so real it was hard to believe it had just been a dream. But no, it wasn't just a dream. It was telling her something. Altman was paranoid of her stealing his title, and he'd stop at nothing to get rid of her. She had originally wanted to wait a little longer before doing it. Now it had become clear that only one of them could be boss, and the other one would end up dead. This dream was a sign. She had to take action quickly before it was too late. Sitting up, she grabbed her cell phone from the desk and tapped in a number. "Bridges, which wing are you in?" "Is this Gates? Geez, it's early. You finally want to hook up." "Bridges, I have no time for chit-chat. It's 2 a.m, so there shouldn't be security outside your wing." She looked out of the window. "The coast is clear too. Can you meet me in room SP56 in 5 minutes?" "For what?" "I've got serious business to talk about." "Sure thing, babe. SP56, is that right?" "Yes, and be careful." The Pact. The dim light flickered intermittently. "What the hell is this all about, Gates?" "I just had a dream. In the dream, Syton came back and told me I had to get rid of him or else I'd die. Just listen to what I'm saying. It's either me or Allman. He's trying to kill me." "Is he really?" Bridges raised an eyebrow. "Don't you just want to murder him so you can become the headquarters boss?" Well, he spoke the truth, though she couldn't admit that. "No, I'm saying he's overly obsessed with getting kicked out by the boss. He doesn't want me to replace him like I did with Syton. That's why he's trying to kill me, like he did back then with the security camera issue. You figured this all out based on a dream? Are you playing with me? No, whether you believe it or not, I heard voices. They told me to do it. They were always there, but then they weren't a minute later. I don't know what's going on, but from what I know, it's certainly time. She looked into his eyes and walked closer to him. Don't you love me, Bridges? Now, look, it's either me or him. Choose. Of course I love you, honey. But what do you want me to do about it? You idiot, Bridges. I'm asking you to kill him for me. Baby, he began. I know it's hard to understand, but I don't do good work for free. How much are you planning to give me? When he's dead, I'll be your boss. I'll pay you double, no, triple your current salary. That should be enough to satisfy you. Now, think about it. 3 times what you get now. What could you do with all that money? Honey, make it 4, then I'll do it. She frowned. 3's the maximum. Well, then I'm afraid I can't do it. Look, it's either 1 or 3. Which would you prefer? But it's a big risk, you know. I might get caught. His voice was dripping with sarcasm. She groaned. All right, make it 4. Yeah, that's more like it, babe. How about tomorrow night? After I find some way to get past security, I'll crawl into his room and shoot him with his own gun. No, you can't do that. He keeps his gun in his jacket all the time, even when he's sleeping. Why don't you use your own gun? You science guys still have a lot to learn about hitmanship. The bullets of each gun are unique, so each kill can be identified and, well, the killer rewarded. But in this case, he'll be rewarded with torture and execution, I suppose. Well, I could stab him, then put the knife in his hand. That'd be the easiest way. But then they'd question why he didn't use his gun. It seems overcomplicated. Hey, give me a day to think of something sensible, okay? I'm the bringer of death. I know how to deal with these things. They only call the captain the bringer of death. Wait, you're the hitman captain now. You never told me that. Suddenly his face went pale. What? She asked. What's the matter? He looked at her again, then his natural face returned, the slightly sardonic smile. Yes, I am. Captain Bridges, Deathbringer. Does that make me hotter or creepier? Both, but I like it. I always thought you were just a normal contract killer. You never told me. Looks like I underestimated you. The captain of the hitmen was 3rd in line to headquarters boss, after head researcher. That's good, babe, so do you trust me with this? Yeah, but you need to be careful. Security's a piece of cake. There's no way they can catch a contract killer. He looked into her eyes and touched her face. How do I know you trust me? What do you mean? I can kiss you again if you like. No, although that would be nice. He looked at her bracelet. It was thin and made of silver and had a pink flower on it. Do you wear that bracelet often? He asked. I always wear it everywhere, along with my watch. Then if you trust me, give it to me. She looked at him strangely. Why are you asking me for... Because only that way I know I can trust you. She took it off and gave it to him. He put it in his pocket and ran a finger down the scar on her cheek. And then he kissed her. And also, he continued, one more thing. I need the head of your next subject. Why's that? Let's just say I don't exactly want him screaming my name out loud before he dies, and in case someone sees me. I don't know where you're going with that, but fine, whatever you want. I'm killing off one tomorrow morning, and I'll deliver it to you before noon. That's good. Be careful, Bridges, she whispered. You too, babe. SB 41. Orman sat in his cubicle and yawned. 2:34 a.m. read his digital clock. It was time for a nap, although he knew it wouldn't be long before it was time to get to work again. There were too many damn things he needed to do. Being the headquarters boss took effort. He wished he was the real boss, who didn't have to do shit, who could watch the dollars pouring in every second. He chucked his cigarette in the bin and lifted himself off his chair. He flicked the lights off and headed down the hallway to his room, in SB 41. Once he'd locked the door, he sat comfortably on his bed and switched on his nightlight, lighting another cigarette. He turned on the television and browsed through the early morning programs. There weren't many interesting ones, so he turned to the news channel. Then he heard a sharp bump behind him. He saw nothing when he turned around, so he dismissed it. Nowhere could be safer than in his own bedroom, where the security camera sitting on his shelf watched everything that happened. Some would say that it's unnerving to feel watched when you're sleeping, but if anything, it made him feel safer. Still, the noise had irritated him, as his room was usually completely silent, and he liked it that way. Had something fallen? He shifted towards the other side of his bed, but stopped when he heard quiet shuffling coming from the wardrobe. Well, that was unusual. He leaned over the lamp to open the door. Suddenly, a hand emerged from the wardrobe. He jumped back, however. Before he could get away, someone wearing a grey sweater grabbed him by the neck and then covered his mouth. His muffled scream stopped when he looked upon the face of this ominous being. No, it wasn't human at all. He'd never seen anything like it before, and he was so horrified he couldn't make a sound. Some creature of the night had found him. It had two bulging eyes which protruded from two bloody sockets. They were covered with veins and grew unevenly on its face, the left eye too low, almost on its cheek, and the right too high, sitting on its forehead. Its nose was crooked and too close to its lips, which seemed fleshy and raw. Its mouth was permanently open, revealing a set of human-like teeth, aligned in an unnaturally crooked way. There was blood on its teeth, and in its left hand was a giant blade. The dim yellow nightlight cast disturbing shadows across its face. Where was security? No one was coming to save him from it. This creature, grabbed his hair and threw him onto the floor face first. It swung its hatchet into his head multiple times, then split open his torso. The last thing he felt was the sharp edge begin to rip through his stomach. The blade cut through his bone. Brains, blood, and intestines began to spill out of him and then onto the floor. Although his heart had stopped beating, the fear he'd experienced in his last moments was forever imprinted into his dead eyes. The creature dropped the hatchet and stayed in the room for a few minutes. Then it escaped down the empty hallway. Aftermath. 5 a.m. An alarm sounded and voices could be heard shouting in the hallway. The headquarters boss is dead. Orman's been attacked. Quick, someone get help. Gates yawned and opened her eyes. As soon as she heard it, she snapped back into consciousness and dressed herself, dabbing on her red lipstick and pulling her shiny blonde hair into a tight bun. She didn't bother to brush her teeth. A giant smile spread across her face. It was absolutely brilliant. Her plan had worked, and Orman was now dead. Everything belonged to her. The whole headquarters, the money, even the posh bedroom was now hers. This was what she'd imagined when she'd first joined the ISS as a low-grade employee. Yvonne Gates, the headquarters boss. If she continued at this rate, she'd soon end up the real boss if he died sometime, but she decided she wasn't going to rush this one. She'd take it easy with him. This was all thanks to Max Bridges. He was the man who'd made all her dreams come true. She really couldn't thank him enough, but the pay rise just wasn't going to happen. She was his boss now. Her life started again here, and anything she'd said before wouldn't count. Furthermore, if he resisted, she could fire him with a snap of her fingers. Well, he still hadn't signed the contract. She ran as best as she could in her high heels down the crowded corridor to room SB41, where hordes of people had gathered. Making her way to the front of the crowd, she peered in through the open door. Her smile faded, and her heart started racing. All she could see was blood and guts and a huge hatchet that had been left at the murder scene. Wait, that wasn't how it was meant to be. The murder was meant to be dressed like a suicide somehow, but this wasn't like that at all. Bridges had said he would have devised some sort of plan, perhaps to get hold of Ormond's bullet somehow, but a hatchet. Well, she needed to talk to Bridges desperately and ask him what was going on. This wasn't what they'd planned at all. She ran back down the hallway and dialed his number on her private cell. "Hey there, this is Max Bridges at your service. I'm busy right now, but you can leave a message." She cursed, hanging up. This wasn't the time. Something was wrong. Suddenly, 2 security guards grabbed her by the arms. What the hell was this? Were they worried for her safety? "Where are you taking me?" she demanded. They ignored her and dragged her further down the hallway. "Let go of me. What do you think you're doing?" "The boss himself has arrived at the murder scene. He ordered us to do this," they replied. "The boss? Why me? Where are you taking me?" she repeated. "The execution chamber." Bringer of death. She arrived in the chamber, greeted by a set of stony faces. Every member of the headquarters branch was gathered here. They stood organized in rank order, and as the boss entered the room, they bowed in unison. Gates, too, was pushed onto her knees before she could speak. She lifted her head and searched the chamber. Nurses, scientists, hitmen. Bridges knelt at the front, and she recognized him even though he was wearing a suit. She tried to catch his gaze, but he continued to look at the floor. "We are here to witness," began the boss, "the first death sentencing of an ISS offender. In our organization, we do not tolerate any misconduct. The murder of a superior is punishable by torture and execution. Yvonne Gates, do you confess to the offense you have committed?" "What? I didn't do anything," she screamed. "Let me go. Boss, it wasn't me. I didn't murder him." "We found this alongside the body." A guard held up a thin, silver bracelet. The pink flower on it was covered with dry blood. It was broken, making it appear as if it had been dropped by mistake. "Everyone who knows Yvonne Gates has verified that this item belongs to her. I don't understand what you were planning, Gates. Didn't you consider the way you conducted that murder was a little obvious?" Well, she panicked. Bridges had taken her trust and deliberately betrayed it. She couldn't believe it, but now she knew all the pieces seemed to fit together perfectly. Why had he chosen to use a hatchet? To blatantly show it was a murder. Furthermore, why had he done that? So he could frame her for doing it. And why had he wanted to frame her? A sudden realization came upon her. Head researcher was always second in line to headquarters boss. The captain of the hitmen was third. That's why he'd broken a sweat when he'd accidentally mentioned it, but she was too dazed to realize anything suspicious. By framing her for killing Ormond, Max Bridges had killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Now he was going to become the headquarters boss. In fact, he had it planned out meticulously carefully from the beginning, as he'd seen his chance coming when she'd first asked him about Ormond's behavior. He'd always been 10 steps ahead of her. She thought she'd been using him to get what she wanted for herself, but it turned out all this time he'd been using her. He had given her a chance, that time where he let his tongue slip when he accidentally mentioned that he was the captain of the hitmen. He'd never told her that. She always thought he was an ordinary contract killer employee until then, and for good reason too. It's the only clue which could have led her to deduce that it wasn't as simple as it seemed, and more people were against her than she thought. But she completely failed to notice it, and she'd pay the ultimate price for that mistake, her life. "It was Max Bridges," she shrieked. "He set me up. He took my bracelet and put it there. He killed Allman. It wasn't me. It wasn't me." "Boss, I did no such thing." Max Bridges stood up. I'd known Yvonne Gates for some time before this happened, but I had no idea she was going to do something like that. Though there was clearly some tension between her and Boss Allman, so I can't understand why it happened. I was a close acquaintance of Gates, therefore I can also understand to some extent why she wanted to frame me, but I deny having anything to do with Allman's murder. It's a disgrace to the organization of the International Secret Service. Greed pays, doesn't it, Gates? Now, as it stands, you'll be the next headquarters boss when Gates has been executed, because you are the organizer of the contract killing system at the ISS headquarters. Is that right? Yes, that could have been another reason why Gates wished to accuse me of the murder. He lifted his head now and looked straight at her, the corners of his lips curving into a threatening smile. She could never talk them out of it. His words were too smooth, too cunning. She wanted to burn him, to leave him in the pits of hell to die in the worst way imaginable. She hated him even more than Allman. But there was nothing she could do. She should have been smarter and gotten away from him while she still had the chance. After all, he was the bringer of death, and she should have expected no less. She was silent, unable to make a comeback. The boss waved his hands, and the guards carried her further into the experiment chamber, which was now about to become the room in which she would die. She saw herself being carried towards the angel's wings, and she screamed and flailed. "Now, let this be a lesson to you all," said the boss. "The justice system in the ISS is much more efficient. We don't wait decades for a confession. Once the evidence has been collected, the accused is sentenced to death. Gates, prepare yourself well. As you should know, the angel's wings are a torture device invented by your own mentor and previous head researcher, Harvey Syton. It is one of the slowest, most painful ways to die on the planet." She was going to die in the angel's wings. It was the real thing now. It was no dream. This was reality. "Had you been a legendary genius like Syton," he continued, "we would have considered keeping you alive a while longer. But you are only a temporary replacement, so don't think too highly of yourself, Gates." They strapped her into the machine as the crowd watched in silence. Jackson pushed the button and the iron nails dug into her flesh. It had been more painful than she'd expected. Jackson remembered how, nearly a year ago, they'd been investigating reports for Syton side by side, but he'd never expected that he'd ultimately be the one to end her, with Syton's own invention. He shook his head and sighed, pulling the lever, and the screaming started. The end. Why hadn't the security camera in Allman's room caught a thing? Jackson had been watching it on the very night he died, but all he saw was an empty room. Replaying the tape again, he saw the same thing and just assumed that he hadn't been having much luck with the cameras recently. He'd thought Allman was working a night shift in his cubicle, so there was nobody in SB-41 the whole night. He told himself to be more careful in the future. If he missed something important one day, he could be executed. He removed the tape from the computer. And that's when he noticed the security code was wrong, and it was missing one digit. It was a fake. The camera had been replaced and the contents of the tape edited. That was the reason why it caught nothing, allowing Allman to be killed. He reminded himself to be more careful in the future, as he'd already signed the contract for life. If he'd missed something important one day, he would be executed. Now, of course, swapping the camera was a smart idea. It seemed like Yvonne Gates had been thinking ahead, being the clever woman she was, but a hatchet. There was something wrong with that. She would never make it so obvious, as the boss had mentioned before. Jackson sat in his cubicle with his head in his hands. Max Bridges had recently been appointed new boss of the headquarters, but but he couldn't help thinking there had been something fishy with his new promotion. He remembered Gates screaming his name in agony as she died, as if she wanted to use her last moments to keep accusing him of it. As of now, there was nobody with the title head researcher, and it made him glad, for he knew anyone with that title would eventually drive themselves insane. Opposite his cubicle was Max Bridges' room. He spotted something odd inside a large grey box, which had its lid half open. He tried to dismiss it as nothing, but he couldn't help thinking it looked something like human hair. Nobody was around, so he quietly entered the room, approaching the box slowly. He'd seen this box in the room a few days ago, but Bridges had always kept it locked. It seemed like he'd forgotten to do that this time. He lifted the metal lid off the box, and a foul stench made him cough. He held his breath. When he looked down and saw what was inside it, he held in a silent scream. A severed human head, with its eyes gouged out, nose, lips, and teeth removed. The skin had been scraped off its neck, leaving it flesh-colored. He recognized the bristly brown hair. It was the head of the last test subject. There was something else in the box, too. He moved the head aside and saw a white piece of plastic, shaped like a triangle, with a string joining one end to another loosely, like that of a mask. He lifted it out of the box and turned it over. Suddenly he was overcome with a feeling of nausea. Human skin was glued to the other side of the plastic in patches. The missing eyes from the severed head were glued onto the skin, but asymmetrically. The nose was glued in the middle, and the lips were also glued on, along with the teeth. He noticed two tiny holes, one just above the left eye, which had been glued on very low down, and the other just below the right eye, which had been glued on too high. It was a mask. An absurd creation. Well, he'd known some strange people during his time working for the ISS, but never with a fetish as creepy as that of Bridges. It seemed he enjoyed making artwork from bits of dead bodies. Looking around to check if anyone was there, he swallowed in disgust. Just as he was about to place the mask back in the box, something large and black caught his eye. A security camera. Why was that in here? He lifted it out of the box and pressed the on button. It loaded, meaning it still had battery left. He saw the room label in the bottom right-hand corner. It was SP41. He'd found the original security camera of Orman's room, which had been removed by the killer. But why was it in Bridges' room? Wiping the dust and dry blood off of the tiny display screen, he went to the menu and clicked on the last video on the list. It showed the time as 2:13:34, when it started filming automatically. His midnight break was from 2 a.m. to 2:30 a.m., when Orman would usually go to bed, so he wouldn't have been watching it then. He skipped the tape to 2:14:09, when he saw the first signs of movement. A suspicious-looking man had entered Orman's room. It was the body of a man, definitely not a woman's figure. The man wore a grey sweater and had his back to the camera. It looked like he was searching for something. A second later, he turned towards the screen, and Jackson nearly dropped the camera in shock. The man's face seemed inhuman and mutilated. His features were twisted and grotesque. The man saw the camera, then quickly advanced towards it. He realized that it wasn't the man's face. No, he was wearing a mask, the same as the mask in the box. The man saw the camera and rushed towards it in the space of around 3 seconds, and the tape ended in static when his face was closest against the camera. He detached the camera, allowing Orman to be murdered later. The mask the man was wearing in the video was the same as the mask in the box. It must have been Max Bridges who detached the camera and murdered Orman. At least, if he hadn't committed the actual murder, then he definitely had something to do with it. The box contained all the evidence that was needed to link him to the murder, and he must have gathered it here, planning to take it out when nobody was looking and possibly burning it. "Ah, Jackson," said a voice behind him. He dropped the camera back into the box and turned around. his heart in his mouth. Bridges walked towards him and closed the door. "Having fun looking through that pile of old rubbish?" "Oh, I apologize for entering your room without permission, boss." "Fair enough. I understand." Bridges smiled down at him, his eyes narrowing. "But this box is full of evidence which says that you had a part to play in Orman's murder. It wasn't just Gates." Jackson took a second to cough. "I'll inform you, Max Bridges, that if the boss sees this evidence, it'll be enough to convict you of murder." As soon as it came out of his mouth, he regretted saying it. Now Bridges knew he'd seen the security footage. Well, he wished he could take it back, but it was too late. "And I'll inform you, Jackson, that the execution chamber is right behind you."
So this is another one of those instances where I just didn't want to let it go. Somebody copyright claiming the background music that I composed myself. You know what? I even make it free for other people to use. CC license, everything. So when someone says, "Oh yeah, I did that," and says, "No, you can't use it without giving me whatever," it sucks, to be honest. It's really, really awful. It has happened a few times over the years, and it's just one of those things. Comes with the territory, as they would say. Anyway, that's it. So that is a remastered version of something I did about 5 years ago. Yeah. So where are we? Wednesday, is it? Yeah. All right. Back again with the podcast on my second channel tomorrow night, and back here on Friday. Thanks for all the positive comments on the Nazi zombies in Switzerland story from Monday night. That was a lot of fun, and it was good to revisit that one as well. Something I also did for another channel many, many years ago. So it's nice to finally have it airing here for the first time. Anyway, I'm waffling on as I always do. Have a lovely evening, everyone. I'm back again real soon.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.